It was late at night on the Harvard campus, and most people had already gone home. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves rustling outside the tall windows of Widener Library. Inside, all was silent except for the occasional hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Dr. Matthew Carter tightened his scarf against the chill as he walked down the long hallway lined with bookshelves. He wasn't planning to stay long, just one last check of the library before heading back to his apartment. But something about this place always drew him in. Matthew loved libraries. They were like temples of knowledge, each shelf holding secrets waiting to be discovered. As a mathematics professor, he spent countless hours surrounded by books and papers, chasing solutions to problems that often felt unsolvable. Tonight, though there was no particular reason for him to linger, his work was done, his lectures prepared, and yet something tugged at him, urging him to take one more look around. As he passed by the study rooms along the corridor, his attention was caught by a faint light spilling out from under the door of room 214. It was unusual for anyone to be here, so late, especially in a study room reserved mostly for graduate students and faculty members. Curious, Matthew slowed his pace and stopped in front of the door. He hesitated for a moment, then gently pushed it open just enough to peek inside. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. There, sitting at a desk surrounded by whiteboards covered in dense equations, was a young girl. She couldn't have been older than 11 or 12. Her hair was neatly braided into 2 rows that framed her face, and she wore a simple hoodie and jeans. Despite the late hour, she seemed completely absorbed in what she was doing. A black marker moved swiftly, in her hand, filling the boards with symbols and formulas that looked impossibly advanced. Matthew blinked, wondering if he was imagining things. Surely no child could understand such complex mathematics. Yet there it was, right in front of him. Equations involving tensors, integrals, and variables that even seasoned researchers struggled to grasp. And not only did they exist on the board, they were being solved step by step, with flawless precision. For several moments, Matthew stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. Finally, he cleared his throat softly, drawing the girl's attention. She turned to look at him, her large brown eyes meeting his gaze without hesitation. There was no fear in her expression, only calm curiosity. "Hi," she said quietly, her voice steady despite her age. "I'll be done soon." Matthew stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. "What are you doing here?" he asked, trying to keep his tone gentle but firm. "These rooms are usually reserved for university staff and students." Girl nodded as if she understood perfectly. "I know. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just needed somewhere quiet to think." Matthew glanced at the whiteboards again, his mind racing. "Do you go to school nearby? Are your parents aware you're here?" She shook her head. "No, I'm fine. I can take care of myself." Then, after a pause, she added, "Would you like me to explain what I'm working on?" Matthew blinked, unsure how to respond. On one hand, this situation was bizarre. How did an 11-year-old end up in a Harvard study room solving equations meant for PhD candidates? On the other hand, her confidence was disarming. He couldn't help but feel intrigued. "Sure," he said finally, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from her. "Tell me what you're working on." The girl smiled faintly and pointed to one section of the board. "This part is about quantum entanglement. It's tricky because we don't fully understand how particles interact across distances, but I think I've found a way to simplify the calculations." Matthew stared at her, stunned. Quantum entanglement was a topic he'd studied extensively during his own research, and even now it remained one of the most challenging areas of theoretical physics. Yet here was a child explaining it as though it were basic arithmetic. "And this," she continued, gesturing to another section, "is related to string theory, specifically, the idea that extra dimensions might fold in on themselves in ways we haven't considered yet." Matthew leaned forward, studying the equations more closely. To his amazement, everything checked out. Every line followed logically, from the one before it leading to conclusions that were both elegant and groundbreaking. How could someone so young possess such insight? "Where did you learn all this?" he asked, his voice tinged with awe. The girl shrugged. "I don't really know, it's just always been there, I guess. Like a song stuck in my head." Matthew frowned, unsure whether to believe her. Was this some kind of prank? Had someone coached her to memorize these equations? But the way she spoke with such clarity and conviction made it hard to doubt her sincerity. Before he could ask another question, the girl set down her marker and turned to face him directly. "You're probably wondering why I'm here," she said. "I came because I needed answers. Things have been happening lately and I don't understand them. Maybe you can help." Matthew hesitated. This whole encounter felt surreal, like stepping into a dream. Still, he couldn't ignore the fact that this girl was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Whatever was going on, it was clear that she was special. "All right," he said slowly. "Let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything." And so, the girl began to speak, sharing pieces of a story that would leave Matthew, and eventually the entire world, utterly astonished. The next morning, Matthew couldn't stop thinking about the girl he had met in the library. Her name was Naomi Johnson, and she had left an impression on him that he couldn't shake. After their conversation, he had walked her out of the building, making sure she got home safely. She lived nearby with her grandmother, who seemed surprised but not alarmed to see Matthew drop her off so late. Naomi's calm demeanor and incredible intellect weighed heavily on Matthew's mind. He knew he couldn't just walk away from this. There was something extraordinary about her, something that demanded further investigation. So, early the next day, he called Dr. Laura Bennett, a sociologist known for her work with child prodigies. If anyone could help make sense of what he'd witnessed, it was her. Laura arrived at his office later that afternoon, carrying a notebook and a cup of coffee. She was a sharp woman in her early 40s, with curly brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude. When Matthew explained the situation, she listened carefully, her brow furrowing as he described Naomi's abilities. "You're saying she solved quantum mechanics equations?" Laura asked skeptically. "At 11? Matthew nodded. "Not only solved them, she simplified them. And she did it faster than I ever could." Laura leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her notebook. "This is unusual, to say the least. Do you think she's been coached? Maybe someone taught her these things?" Matthew shook his head. "I don't think so. She didn't hesitate when I asked her questions, and she spoke about concepts like they were second nature to her. It wasn't memorization, it was understanding." Laura sighed, rubbing her temples. "Well, we need to test her. See if she can replicate what she did last night. If she's truly capable of this level of cognition, it could change everything we know about human potential." That evening, Matthew and Laura invited Naomi back to campus. They set up a meeting in one of the smaller conference rooms, filling it with puzzles, logic games, and mathematical challenges designed to assess cognitive ability. Naomi arrived wearing the same yellow hoodie from the previous night. Her braids, tied neatly with colorful ribbons, she greeted them politely before sitting down at the table. "Are we playing games?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "In a way," Laura replied with a smile. "We want to see how you solve problems. Don't worry, it's just for fun." Naomi shrugged and picked up the first puzzle, a Rubik's Cube. Within seconds, she twisted it into place, solving it effortlessly. Next came a series of logic riddles, which she answered without pause. By the time they moved on to the mathematics portion, both Matthew and Laura were visibly stunned. They presented her with problems ranging from calculus to advanced number theory, each more difficult than the last. Naomi tackled them all with ease, scribbling solutions onto sheets of paper as though she were merely jotting down notes. At one point, she stopped mid-calculation and looked up at Matthew. "Is this okay?" she asked. "It's kind of easy." Matthew exchanged a glance with Laura, who was busy writing observations in her notebook. Easy? These were problems that graduate students struggled with for weeks. Yet Naomi breezed through them like they were elementary school homework. Finally, Laura decided to push her limits. She handed Naomi a laptop and pulled up a simulation program used by researchers to model multi-dimensional systems. "Can you figure out what this does?" Laura asked. Naomi studied the screen for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then, with surprising speed, she began typing commands, adjusting variables, and running calculations. Within minutes, the program generated a result that neither Matthew nor Laura had seen before, an entirely new configuration of the system. "How did you do that?" Matthew asked, leaning closer to inspect the results. Naomi shrugged again. "It's like putting pieces together. Once you see the pattern, it makes sense." Laura closed her notebook, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," she said to Matthew, gesturing toward the hallway. Once outside, Laura turned to him, her voice low but urgent. "This isn't normal, not even close. We're dealing with something beyond conventional genius here. Have you considered the possibility that she might not be entirely human?" Matthew frowned. "What are you suggesting? That she's some kind of alien or AI?" "I'm not ruling anything out," Laura said firmly. "Her knowledge base is too vast, too specific. And the way she processes information, it's almost mechanical, like she's accessing a database instead of recalling memories." Matthew hesitated. The idea sounded absurd, but he couldn't deny that Naomi's abilities defied explanation. Still, there was something about her that felt undeniably human. Her laughter, her curiosity, her occasional shyness, they all pointed to a real, living person. Before they could discuss it further, a knock came from the door. A tall man in a dark suit stood in the doorway, flanked by two others. He introduced himself as Agent Ryan Cole, representing a government agency tasked with investigating unusual phenomena. "We've heard reports about a young girl demonstrating extraordinary capabilities," he said, his tone polite but firm. "We'd like to speak with her." Matthew instinctively stepped in front of the door. "She's just a child. Whatever you're planning, you'll have to go through us first." Agent Cole raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Carter, I assure you our intentions are purely scientific. However, if you refuse to cooperate, we may have to take more drastic measures." Laura stepped forward, her voice steady. "Let's hear what he has to say, Matthew. For now, we play along." Reluctantly, Matthew agreed, and they allowed Agent Cole to enter the room. Naomi looked up from the laptop, unfazed by the sudden intrusion. "Hello," she said cheerfully. "Are you here to learn too?" Agent Cole smiled faintly, though his eyes remained sharp. "In a manner of speaking, can you tell me where you learned all this?" Naomi tilted her head, considering the question. "I don't know, it's always been there, like breathing. But lately it's been louder, like someone's talking to me." The room fell silent. Matthew and Laura exchanged worried glances, while Agent Cole's expression hardened. Whatever Naomi was describing, it clearly aligned with his suspicions. When the meeting ended, Agent Cole thanked them for their cooperation but made it clear that this was far from over. As he left, Matthew turned to Laura, his face pale. "What do we do now?" Laura sighed, looking toward Naomi, who was still seated at the table, humming softly to herself. "We protect her," she said. "Whatever happens next, we keep her safe." And with that, they braced themselves for the storm that was sure to come. After Agent Cole's visit, things began to escalate quickly. News of Naomi's abilities spread beyond Harvard's campus, reaching people who had no business knowing about her. Matthew and Laura knew it was only a matter of time before more agents, or worse, showed up. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. One evening, after sending Naomi home with strict instructions to stay indoors, Matthew and Laura met in his office to discuss their next move. The weight of the situation hung heavy between them. Neither of them had signed up for this kind of responsibility. Yet here they were, tasked with protecting a child who might hold the key to humanity's future, or its destruction. "We can't keep running tests," Laura said, pacing back and forth. "We're not getting anywhere. We need to know what she knows and why she knows it." Matthew nodded, staring out the window at the darkening sky. "She mentioned hearing voices earlier. That's not normal, even for someone like her." What if there's more to her story? Something she hasn't told us yet? Laura stopped pacing and looked at him. Then we ask her. Directly. No games, no distractions, just straight-up questions. The next day, they arranged another meeting with Naomi. This time they chose a quieter location, an empty classroom on the top floor of the science building. It was late afternoon, and golden sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the desks. Naomi arrived wearing her usual yellow hoodie, clutching a small object in her hands. "Hi," she said softly, taking a seat at one of the desks. "You wanted to talk?" Matthew pulled up a chair and sat across from her. Laura leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Naomi," Matthew began, choosing his words carefully. "We need to understand something. You've been talking about these ideas in your head. Where do they come from?" Naomi hesitated, looking down at the object in her lap. It was a smooth, metallic orb, about the size of a baseball. She held it gently, as though it were precious. "I don't know how to explain it," she admitted. "It's like dreams, but clearer. Sometimes I see places I've never been, people I've never met, and then there's this." She held up the orb. "It's always been with me. Ever. Since I can remember." Matthew and Laura exchanged glances. Neither of them had seen the orb before. "What does it do?" Laura asked, her voice calm but curious. Naomi shrugged. "I'm not sure. But when I touch it, I feel connected, like it's showing me things." Without waiting for permission, she pressed her palm against the orb's surface. Instantly it lit up, emitting a soft glow that filled the room. Holographic images began to project into the air, swirling galaxies, intricate alien structures, and strange symbols that pulsed with light. Matthew and Laura watched in stunned silence as the projections danced around them, revealing secrets far beyond human comprehension. This isn't possible," Laura whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Where did you get this?" "I told you," Naomi said quietly. "It's always been mine. I think it's trying to tell me something about everything." Matthew reached out tentatively, brushing his fingers against one of the holograms. It rippled like water, responding to his touch. "These designs, they look like schematics for machines or technology. Do you understand any of it?" Naomi nodded. "Some parts, yes, but it's hard. Like listening to music underwater. You catch bits and pieces, but the rest is muffled." Laura stepped closer, her mind racing. "If this is real, if this thing really does what it looks like it does, then we're dealing with something far bigger than we imagined. Bigger than Harvard. Bigger than Earth." Matthew turned to Naomi, his expression serious. "Do you trust us, Naomi? Because if you do, we need to figure out how to use this. Together." Naomi looked at him, her young face surprisingly wise. "I trust you, but you should know. It's not just about us. There's more coming. I can feel it." Her words sent a chill down Matthew's spine. Before he could respond, the door burst open, startling all three of them. A group of men in suits stormed into the room, led by none other than Agent Ryan Cole. Behind them stood several armed guards, their weapons drawn. "Step away from the device," Cole ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "Now." Matthew instinctively moved in front of Naomi, shielding her from view. "You can't take her," he said firmly. "She's just a child." Cole's gaze hardened. "This isn't about her. It's about what she has. Hand over the orb, or we'll take it by force." Laura stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Listen to me. You don't understand what you're dealing with. If you try to take that thing without knowing how it works, you could trigger something catastrophic." Cole ignored her, motioning for his men to advance. Naomi clutched the orb tightly, her knuckles white. "Please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Don't let them take it, it's important." Matthew glanced at Laura, silently asking what to do. In that split second, Laura made a decision. "We run," she mouthed. With a nod, Matthew grabbed Naomi's hand and bolted toward the door. Laura followed close behind, shouting distractions to slow down the agents. The chase spilled out into the hallway where students and faculty stared in confusion as the unlikely trio sprinted past. They ducked into a stairwell, descending 2 flights before slipping through a hidden service entrance. Outside, the cool, evening air hit them like a wave. Matthew led them toward the parking lot where Laura's car was waiting. They piled in, hearts pounding, and sped off into the night. As they drove, Naomi sat quietly in the back seat, still holding the orb. Its glow had dimmed, but the tension in the car remained thick. Finally, Matthew broke the silence. "What now?" he asked, glancing at Laura in the rearview mirror. Laura took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "We find somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look, and then we figure out exactly what we're dealing with." Naomi leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I know what it wants." All eyes turned to her. "What do you mean?" Matthew asked. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "It's not just a tool, it's a message. From somewhere else. Someone, or something, is trying to reach us. And they're running out of time." The car fell silent again, each of them grappling with the enormity of what she'd said. Whatever the orb was, it wasn't just a piece of alien technology. It was a lifeline, or perhaps a warning, and Naomi was the only one who could decipher it. After fleeing the university, Matthew, Laura, and Naomi found themselves driving aimlessly through the outskirts of Boston. They knew they couldn't stay in the city. It was too risky. Government agents would be searching every corner, using surveillance cameras, phone records, and anything else they could get their hands on to track them down. Every second counted. Laura drove steadily, keeping her eyes peeled for any sign of trouble. The roads grew quieter as they moved farther from the city, eventually giving way to dense forests and empty fields. Naomi sat silently in the back seat, cradling the orb in her lap. Its faint glow pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. "Where are we going?" Matthew finally asked, breaking the silence. Laura glanced at him briefly before returning her focus to the road. "Somewhere remote, somewhere no one will think to look. But where?" Matthew pressed. "We can't just drive forever." Laura hesitated, then nodded toward the rear-view mirror. "She knows." Naomi looked up, startled by the sudden attention. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. "You said the orb is a message," Laura replied, her tone firm but gentle. "If it's guiding you, then we need to trust that. Where should we go?" Naomi stared at the orb, her brow furrowing in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly the orb began to emit a brighter light, casting soft hues of blue and purple across the interior of the car. A holographic map appeared, hovering in the air between them. It showed a series of winding paths leading deep into the forest, ending at what looked like an abandoned building marked with strange symbols. "That's where we need to go," Naomi said quietly. "It feels right." Matthew exchanged a glance, with Laura, who shrugged. "It's as good a plan as any," she said. "Let's hope it doesn't lead us straight into a trap." They followed the map's directions, leaving the main roads behind and venturing onto narrow dirt trails surrounded by towering trees. The further they went, the darker it became, until the only light came from the orb and the headlights of the car. Eventually, they reached a clearing where an old, decrepit structure stood, a crumbling warehouse that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. "This is it," Naomi said, stepping out of the car. Her voice carried a note of certainty that reassured the others, even though the place seemed ominous. Inside, the air was musty, and the floor was covered in dust and debris. But there was something else, a network of tunnels hidden beneath the building. Using flashlights, they descended into the underground labyrinth, following Naomi as she navigated confidently with the orb lighting their way. As they walked, Naomi began to speak, sharing fragments of memories that felt both foreign and familiar. "The orb talks to me sometimes," she explained. "Not with words exactly, more like feelings or images. It shows me things, places I've never been, people I don't recognize, and it tells me we're not alone. Matthew frowned. You mean aliens? Like the ones who made the orb? Naomi shook her head. I don't know if they're aliens. Maybe. Or maybe there's something else entirely. All I know is that they've been watching us for a long time. Waiting. Waiting for what? Laura asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Naomi paused, turning to face them. Her expression was serious, her eyes filled with a wisdom far beyond her years. For humanity to prove itself. To show that we're ready. Ready for what? Matthew demanded, frustration creeping into his voice. For this. Naomi held up the orb, which suddenly flared with intense light. The holograms reappeared, showing detailed schematics of machines and devices unlike anything they'd ever seen. Blueprints for technology capable of harnessing energy from other dimensions. Technology that could change the world, or destroy. Laura stepped closer, studying the projections. This is incredible. If we can build these devices, we could solve so many problems. Clean energy, medical advancements, even reversing climate change. But at what cost? Matthew countered. If this kind of power falls into the wrong hands. It won't, Naomi interrupted firmly. That's why they sent me, to make sure it's used the right way. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. Dust fell from the ceiling and the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnels. Someone, or something, was coming. We have to move, Laura said urgently, grabbing Naomi's hand. Now. They hurried deeper into the tunnels, guided by the orb's glow. After several minutes, they emerged into a larger chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings that matched the symbols from the holograms. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, shaped perfectly to hold the orb. This is it, Naomi said, her voice tinged with awe. This is where it belongs. She placed the orb onto the pedestal, and the entire chamber lit up. The carvings glowed with the same blue and purple hues, forming intricate patterns that pulsed with energy. A low hum filled the air, growing louder until it vibrated through their very bones. Then, without warning, the room shifted. The walls dissolved into a swirling vortex of light and sound, and the three of them found themselves standing in a vast, open space filled with stars and galaxies. Before them stood ethereal beings, tall, luminous figures whose forms flickered like flames. One of them stepped forward, its presence both comforting and overwhelming. It spoke directly into their minds, bypassing language entirely. You have been chosen, it said, to guide your species toward unity, or face annihilation. Matthew, Laura, and Naomi exchanged stunned looks, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. But one thing was clear. Naomi's role was far greater than any of them had imagined. She wasn't just a messenger. She was a bridge, a connection between two worlds. And now, the fate of humanity rested on her shoulders. The presence of the ethereal beings filled the chamber with an overwhelming sense of power and calm all at once. Their forms were constantly shifting, like living light, and their eyes, or what seemed to be eyes, glowed with an intelligence that felt ancient and infinite. Naomi stood frozen in place, clutching the orb tightly, though it now rested on the pedestal. Matthew and Laura flanked her, their hearts pounding but their resolve unshaken. One of the beings stepped forward, its movements fluid and graceful. It didn't speak aloud. Instead, its words resonated directly in their minds, clear and unwavering. You have been chosen, the being repeated, its voice a blend of many tones layered together. Your species teeters on the edge of destruction. This child has been sent to guide you, but the choice is yours to make. Naomi swallowed hard, her small hands trembling slightly. She looked up at the towering figure, her voice steady despite her fear. What do you want us to do? The being tilted its head, studying her with an intensity that made Matthew and Laura feel almost invisible. We offer knowledge, it said. Technology capable of solving your greatest challenges. Hunger, disease, war, all can be addressed, if used wisely. But there's a catch, isn't there? Matthew interrupted, his tone sharp. He couldn't help feeling skeptical. This kind of power doesn't come without consequences. The being turned its gaze toward him, and for a moment Matthew felt as though he were staring into eternity itself. "You are correct," it replied. "Such gifts require responsibility. Humanity must prove itself worthy, not just through words, but through actions. Unity is key. Division will lead only to ruin." Laura stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "How do we prove ourselves? What exactly are you asking us to do?" The being gestured toward the glowing orb. "Build this device," it instructed. "It is a prototype, a test. If humanity uses it for good, more will follow, but if greed or conflict drives your decisions—" Its form flickered ominously. "Then all will be lost." Matthew glanced at Naomi, who was still standing silently, absorbing every word. She seemed smaller somehow, overwhelmed by the weight of the responsibility placed upon her. Yet there was also a spark of determination in her eyes, a quiet strength that reassured him she could handle whatever came next. "We'll do it," Matthew said finally, speaking not just for himself, but for everyone present. "We'll build the prototype. We'll show them we're ready." The being nodded slowly, its expression unreadable. "Time is short. You must act quickly. Others will seek to claim this gift for themselves. Protect it, and yourselves." With that, the chamber began to shift again. The swirling vortex of stars faded, replaced by the dim, familiar surroundings of the underground tunnels. The glowing carvings on the walls dimmed until only the faintest traces of light remained. For a moment, no one spoke. They simply stood, there processing what had just happened. Finally, Laura broke the silence. "We need to get to work. If those agents find out about this, we're finished." Matthew nodded in agreement. "We'll need help. Someone trustworthy who can keep this secret." Naomi looked up at them, her face pale but resolute. "I know someone who might help." Later that night, they regrouped in a secluded cabin deep in the woods. It belonged to Daniel Hayes, a tech-savvy graduate student who had worked closely with Matthew on several projects. Daniel was known for his brilliance and discretion, making him the perfect ally for their mission. When Matthew explained the situation, Daniel didn't hesitate. "Are you kidding? This is insane and amazing. Of course I'll help." Over the next few days, the four of them pored over the schematics projected by the orb. The designs were unlike anything they'd ever seen, combining elements of quantum mechanics, artificial intelligence, and materials science that defied conventional understanding. Building the prototype would require scavenging parts from abandoned labs, hacking into restricted databases, and working tirelessly under constant threat of discovery. Despite the challenges, progress came faster than expected. Naomi played a crucial role, translating the holographic instructions into terms the others could understand. Her connection to the orb allowed her to intuitively grasp concepts that would have taken months, or even years, for seasoned scientists to decipher. The prototype neared completion. Strange phenomena began occurring worldwide. Electromagnetic disturbances disrupted communications, causing blackouts in major cities. Unexplained lights streaked across the skies, sparking panic among civilians. Reports of missing scientists flooded the news, fueling conspiracy theories and government cover-ups. Agent Ryan Cole reappeared, leading a team of agents tasked with tracking down Naomi and recovering the orb. He issued public statements claiming the device posed a national security risk, while privately admitting to his superiors that it represented humanity's greatest opportunity, or its gravest mistake. Meanwhile, Naomi grew increasingly uneasy. She often woke in the middle of the night, plagued by vivid dreams of distant worlds and shadowy figures watching her every move. The orb pulsed more frequently, its glow growing brighter as if urging her to hurry. "This isn't just about us anymore," she told Matthew one evening, her voice heavy with emotion. "They're testing us, watching to see if we'll pass." Matthew placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're doing everything we can, Naomi. Trust me, we won't let you down." But deep down, he wasn't sure if they could succeed. The stakes were unimaginably high, and failure meant far more than losing the prototype. It meant losing hope for humanity itself. By the time the prototype was ready, tensions had reached a breaking point. Armed forces surrounded the cabin, cutting off any chance of escape. Agent Cole arrived personally, demanding entry. Inside, Matthew, Laura, Daniel, and Naomi prepared for what might be their final stand. "Whatever happens," Naomi said, clutching the completed prototype tightly. "We did our best." Matthew nodded, gripping her hand firmly. "And that's all anyone can ask of us." As the door burst open and agents stormed inside, Naomi stepped forward, holding the prototype aloft. Its glow intensified, filling the room with blinding light. In that moment, she knew. This was the moment humanity would prove itself or fall forever. The moment Naomi raised the prototype, the room erupted into chaos. Agents shouted orders, their weapons trained on her, while Matthew, Laura, and Daniel stood frozen, unsure of what would happen next. But before anyone could act, the orb's glow intensified, flooding the chamber with blinding light. The air crackled with energy and the temperature dropped sharply. When the light faded, the ethereal beings reappeared, standing protectively behind Naomi. Their presence silenced the room instantly. Even Agent Cole, who had been barking commands just moments ago, froze in place, his eyes wide with shock. "You have come far," one of the beings said, its voice resonating deeply within everyone's minds. "But now you must choose. Will you use this gift to unite, or will you succumb to division?" Naomi stepped forward, her small frame dwarfed by the towering luminous figures beside her. She held the prototype out toward the agents, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "This isn't a weapon," she said firmly. "It's a chance, for all of us. If we work together, we can fix everything that's broken. Hunger, disease, war. They don't have to exist anymore." Agent Cole hesitated, lowering his gun slightly. His gaze shifted between Naomi and the glowing orb, uncertainty flickering across his face. "How do we know it won't destroy us?" he asked, his tone softer than before. "You don't," Naomi admitted, "but you also don't know if it'll save you. That's why you have to trust us, to trust each other." Matthew and Laura exchanged glances, then stepped forward to stand beside Naomi. Daniel followed suit, clutching a laptop filled with schematics and calculations. Together they formed a united front, ready to defend not just the prototype, but the hope it represented. For several tense moments, no one moved. Then slowly, Agent Cole holstered his weapon. "We're not leaving," he said, addressing Naomi directly, "but we're listening." The tension in the room eased slightly, though the weight of the decision remained heavy. Naomi turned back to the ethereal beings, her expression calm but resolute. "They need time," she said. "Time to learn, to grow. Can you give them that?" The beings exchanged silent communication, their forms flickering softly. After what felt like an eternity, the leader nodded. "We will grant your request, but know this. Humanity's actions will determine its future. Use this gift wisely." With that, the beings began to fade, their forms dissolving into streams of light that merged with the orb. As they disappeared, the chamber grew quieter, the oppressive energy lifting. Only the faint hum of the prototype remained, a reminder of the monumental task ahead. Over the following weeks, Matthew, Laura, Daniel, and Naomi worked tirelessly to share the prototype's potential with the world. They collaborated with scientists, engineers, and policymakers, ensuring that every step was guided by transparency and cooperation. Governments initially resisted, wary of relinquishing control over such powerful technology. But Naomi's unwavering determination, and the undeniable results produced by the prototype, began to win them over. The first breakthrough came when the prototype successfully generated clean, limitless energy. Entire cities powered by sustainable resources became a reality overnight. Medical advancements followed, curing diseases once thought incurable and extending lifespans beyond anything previously imagined. Conflicts began to ease as nations realized they no longer needed to fight over dwindling resources. But progress wasn't without challenges. Greed and fear threatened to derail the project multiple times, Corporations sought to monopolize the technology, while rogue factions attempted to steal it for their own gain. Each time, Naomi stood firm, reminding everyone of the promise they'd made, not just to the ethereal beings, but to themselves. "We've been given a second chance," she told a group of world leaders during a pivotal meeting. "If we squander, it will lose more than just this technology. We'll lose our humanity." Her words struck a chord, inspiring unity where there had once been division. Slowly but surely, the world began to change, not because of the prototype itself, but because of the mindset it fostered. People started working together, prioritizing the greater good over personal gain. Months later, Naomi found herself back at the abandoned warehouse where it had all begun. The underground chamber was quiet now, the carvings on the walls dark and lifeless. She knelt beside the pedestal, placing the orb gently onto its surface. Though the prototype had fulfilled its purpose, the orb still pulsed faintly, as if acknowledging her presence. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "for trusting me." As she stood up, Matthew approached, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. "What happens now?" he asked softly. Naomi smiled, looking out at the horizon where the sun was beginning to rise. "Now we keep going. This is just the start." Matthew nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than anyone could have asked of you, Naomi. You've changed the world." She shook her head, her smile widening. "No, Dr. Carter, we did. All of us." Together, they walked out of the warehouse, leaving the orb behind. Its glow faded completely as the door closed, signaling the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Across the globe, people marveled at the changes brought about by the prototype. Clean energy-powered homes, advanced medicine healed the sick, and international cooperation replaced conflict. Humanity had proven itself worthy, or so it seemed. But Naomi knew better. She understood that the true test lay ahead. The orb's creators had given them a gift, but it came with a responsibility they couldn't afford to forget. As she climbed into the car with Matthew, Laura, and Daniel, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. "We've been given a chance to build something better," she said, looking at each of them in turn. "And I think we're ready." Though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, one thing was clear. Naomi Johnson wasn't just a child prodigy or a messenger from another world. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, humanity could rise to meet the challenges before it, and with that they drove off into the sunrise, ready to shape the future together.